Cavin Elizabeth, a wedding photographer and bridal boutique owner based in San Diego, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how to decide which month you should get married. There are a lot of things to consider when you are trying to decide which month you should get married in. There's 12 to choose from, and today I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things that you might want to think about when you are trying to figure that out. So the first thing that you should consider is the weather. So there are a lot of things to think about when it comes to weather. First things first, I would think about how rainy it might be in your month. If you live in a place that gets a lot of rain, you should obviously avoid the months where it rains a lot unless you are getting married in a place that is all indoors and you do not care about taking portraits outside. But of course, if you are wanting to take pictures outside, you might be getting married outside, do not choose a month that is particularly rainy, even a risky rainy month. If you do choose a rainy month or some month that might rain, I would definitely invest in having a tent on standby in case you need to have a tent, and then also be mentally prepared to take your pictures inside and be okay with what the interior of your venue looks like, and have that in mind in case you need to use it as a backdrop and be okay with that. Also, you need to consider how hot it might be in those months or how cold it might be, and if you're going to be okay with that. Obviously, Florida in July is very different than Vermont in July, although both are still very warm. And if you are having a huge, massive ball gown that is very warm, I would definitely avoid hot summer months because you are going to be miserable. I once photographed a wedding many years ago with a bride who had the biggest ball gown I have ever seen in my life, and she put a petticoat underneath it, and we shot a wedding where it was probably 110 degrees outside and everybody sweated profusely the entire day. So I would not recommend something like that. So that is something you need to consider, is the weather. The second thing to think about has a lot to do with your photos, and that is the timing of the sunset. So obviously the winter months have a very early sunset, and in those months I would highly recommend that you have a first look so that you can get all of your portraits, so your wedding party, your family, your couple's portraits done before the ceremony starts. Otherwise, it is highly possible that if you do not have a first look during the winter months, that you might end up having to take some of your portraits in the dark, and that is not ideal depending on the look that you're going for. So this is something that you can watch in my video on first looks. I have all the pros and cons, and I think I touch on this a little bit, but I would highly recommend doing a first look if you are getting married during the winter months. But anyways, just consider the timing of the sunset and the look that you want for your portraits. The third thing to think about is your honeymoon. So if you are hoping to honeymoon immediately after your wedding, and that's sort of the plan and the vibe that you're going for, you need to consider where you're going to honeymoon and what month you want to honeymoon in. So if you are hoping to honeymoon in like a tropical place, you need to consider the weather there. Is it hurricane season? How much is it going to cost when I go? Is it a shoulder season? Is it going to be a hot month? All those kinds of things you need to think about. What's going on in those months during that time? Are there any major events happening? Things like that you really need to plan ahead and think about. If you're not honeymooning immediately after your wedding, then obviously this does not matter at all, but it is something to consider. Now the fourth one has to do with flowers. If you're really passionate about your flowers, you need to consider the season, the time of month, everything like that, that your flowers are going to be in season. So flowers cost more when they are out of season because your florist has to get them shipped in, pay more for them when they're out of season. They really do cost a lot more when they're not in season. So if there are particular flowers you want, you need to Google, find out when they're in season, and perhaps get married in the same month, or at least right after the month that they're in season, something like that. So you need to really plan around the flowers that you want. If there's particular colors, flowers, whatever, just plan accordingly for your flowers. I did this for my wedding. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but think all about the flowers. This is very important if you love your flowers. The fifth tip is to just generally avoid any month where you have heavy work or life commitments. If you know that December has a lot going on for you at work and you might not be able to take a lot of time off, or you're just generally more stressed out at work during that time of month, or maybe you have a lot of family birthdays or family things going on in that month, maybe don't get married that month because you don't want to have a lot of things going on in your life at the same time that you're getting married, because it's just too much going on. You want the month where you're getting married to be the least stressful month, or at least a low stress month in your life, because it's just too much to balance if you've got way too much going on at the same time. So choose a low stress month in your life where there's not too much generally going on at work and not too much going on in your life. You want it to be easygoing. Now, just generally speaking, off-season months, at least in the US, tend to be months like January through March, and those might come with venue discounts or venue lower pricing, things like that. But also that does come with colder times of the year and also earlier sunset. So everything is a balance in the world of weddings. There might be higher season months with higher costs that might be more desirable times of the year to get married. So you really have to think about when you want to get married, and it might be lower cost, but it might be a lesser desirable month to get married. So you really have to plan these things out. Think about the cost, think about the time of year, think about life commitments going on, things like that. So you have to balance everything out with your pros and cons list, and I really recommend doing that, making a list of all the things that you value, your pros and cons, things like that. Make a list and think about the time that you want to get married. So for my particular wedding, we considered getting married in April, and then we also considered October based on the time when we got engaged. And we really thought hard about this because I wanted to get married in a time of year that had a good sunset. That for me was really important. April obviously was after like daylight savings, so we would have a good amount of light. October was going to be when we were going to get married right before daylight savings, so that was also going to have a good sunset time. So either one was going to be really good for portraits. We were going to have a lot of light. Also, April was going to have really good weather. That for me was going to be nice. It wasn't going to be hot yet. I did not want to be hot at my wedding. October actually ran the risk of being hot in San Diego. Sometimes October is blazing hot here, sometimes it's nice and cool. It's really hit or miss. So that actually kind of worried me a little bit. So I wasn't sure if we wanted to pick October. Now for me, April had really good flowers. That was a really good selling point for me for April. So I was kind of leaning more towards April for that reason. As far as the honeymoon went, we really were more leaning towards April. April for Bora Bora, where we honeymooned, was a shoulder season, or at least like slight shoulder season. So it had a little bit better rates than October. So that for us was a good selling point, and we really liked that because we actually did want a honeymoon right after our wedding. So we liked April for that reason. And then also too, October and April, both are pretty good in terms of rain. April ran a slight risk of rain, but we were willing to take that risk. We thought like, okay, if we had to get a tent on the lawn, that's not the worst case scenario. We did not like the interior venue at our particular venue. We did not want to go inside for it, so we would rather get a tent on the lawn than go inside, and we were okay with that option. There were enough indoor spaces to take portraits and covered archways that we were okay with having that happen in April, that we were fine with the outcome of the portraits if it were to rain or sprinkle. And in San Diego, when it rains, it usually doesn't downpour. It's usually more of a light rain, so it wasn't going to be a huge deal. If we had to go out in the rain for like a couple of pictures, run back under, it wasn't going to be a big deal. So ultimately, we did end up choosing April. The flowers, the time of year for being cooler was the biggest reasons for us. I hope that you guys chose the best month for you if you already chose, or if you are deciding which month to choose, you are now better able to make that decision. So anyways, leave a comment down below. What was the reason that you chose your month, or now why you're figuring out what to choose? Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, leave a like, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!